Hello, I'm Paul Briley, and you're listening to Off the Comma. I'm a human who cares about supporting other humans. On this podcast, we explore all facets of what it means to feel stuck in life. We talk with people just like us who found themselves sitting on a comma and not knowing where to go next. We'll unpack the experience with them, where they've been stuck, what it feels like, what they experienced, and what they learned. My goal is to inspire you by seeing yourself in others. I believe that when we feel more connected and seen, magic can happen. And remember, if you find yourself sitting on a comma in your life, you can also talk to me without a microphone. To explore coaching with me and getting off the comma in your own life, check out my information and book a call with me at offthecomma.com. And I'm also doing something different. I'm curating my own sponsor community, local businesses and professionals who I handpick and who align with our vision here. Be sure to check them out, learn more about them on my website and my YouTube channel. In the meantime, let's get into this week's conversation. And we are back again. We just continue to add fresh new stories to our community of storytellers. And I'm so excited. I'm so honored. And I feel so freaking privileged to be able to do this work. And at the time that we're recording this podcast, we're actually recording this podcast fairly well in advance of when it is going to air. But it has just been such a cool ride with all of the amazing people that just continue to show up from episode 2 onward, all these cool people that I get to meet along the way. And even some of the people that I already know that I get to bring into this podcast. It's just been such an honor and such a cool thing. And so I'm very excited to be back with another weekly episode. And I'm excited to meet yet another person who I don't really have any history with. So I'm looking forward to meeting them and learning about them through their story today. And another thing that's really cool about this podcast is that I've always wanted it to be not just stories of everyday people, but people from all over the world. And while we have dibbled and dabbled and met people from a small number of countries so far, today is a guest from yet another country, some places different from where I grew up. And that's another thing that I love about this podcast is that we get to hear what life is like in other parts of the world. So with that said, I'm going to shut up now and I'm going to hand it over to Jack. We're talking today to Jack Glennon, who comes to us from Australia, and I'll let him tell the rest of his story. Jack, welcome to the podcast. And before we actually get into your story, let's learn a little bit about you. How would you like to be known? And then share a little bit about what you would like for us to know about you.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here. How would I like to be known? Great question. I guess using sort of 3 words, firstly would be authentic, honest, and adventurous. Probably not necessarily in that order, but definitely those 3 words. And I've always had that mantra throughout my life of being authentically me. But also pushing boundaries and have this sort of mantra of I'm here once and I want to live it as much as I can. And through the story, even more so, because I'm aware that tomorrow I might not be here. Sounds cliche, but at the same time, it's also often the case.
Well, it's cool because, we often tell ourselves that, but it sounds like you're really kind of living into that and taking that very seriously. And so I'm curious to see how that's going to show up in the story that you share with us today. What else would you like to tell us about yourself? What's important to you?
A small, I suppose, a short version of my relatively long and detailed history. You'll pick up from the accent, or maybe you won't. Some people do, some people don't. I'm not originally from Australia. Originally, I'm from the UK. But when growing up, I didn't want to particularly go to university. I saw it as a big waste of time and money, if I'm honest. I wanted to go and learn by the school of hard knocks and learn through life, learn through learning. And I did that. I did various jobs and careers at a very young, early age. But every year, because I didn't have that opportunity to go away on a gap year and see the world, I did one thing crazy every year to kind of scratch that itch. So I ran with the bulls in Pamplona. I snorkeled with killer whales. I did bungee jumping, skydiving. I had to do one thing a year to kind of keep that going, again, that adventurous side. Up until a point where my mum, bless her, she probably regrets it now, but she took me to a pub in England and said, you need to get out of here. You need to go. And at the time, I was in my early 20s, but I bought a small house and had a car and had a girlfriend, but she was right. And I left the lot and came here to Australia. And I fell in love with scuba diving, and stayed here for a few months. Ended up going around Southeast Asia, falling in love with different countries in Southeast Asia, getting caught in the civil war in Thailand. That's a story for another
Mm.
day.
Mm.
And then getting deported from China. So that was a good trip. But I ended up going back to the UK, and surprising everyone early because I got deported. But I was back in the UK for a grand total of 10 days before I was on a one-way flight back to Australia.
I was just gonna say it's just an interesting little trivia point. Obviously we're collecting stories from many, many people here, and we're gonna come immediately back to your story. Fascinating. I hear from people who talk about traveling and doing all the things and stuff. You're one of two people now who has talked about having been deported from a foreign country. So I had to acknowledge that, like, even that in and of itself is like an interesting, cool thing to know about you.
Yeah, it was a strange one. It was my fault, wasn't my fault. I knew I had a flight from Bangkok to Beijing. I wasn't Shanghai. I think it was Shanghai. But with visas, you can, for China at the time, I don't know if it's still the same. You could only get a visa within a certain time period. I think it was within 2 weeks or 3 weeks of you going. And every time whilst I was going around Southeast Asia, literally every time I was in a capital city or a city with a consulate, it was closed, or it was a public holiday, or it was a weekend. So every time I tried to get a visa, I couldn't. And
Mm.
thankfully, I had a friend of mine who worked in Beijing, and I emailed him to go, "What do I do?" And he said, "Look, this is," and he basically gave me a full breakdown of everything that was going to happen. So, which he was spot on right, because I I landed, they arrested me on site, and they shouted at me and was very upset and angry, and then put me on a flight directly home via Muscat,
Wow.
I think, from memory. But yeah, it's an experience. I wouldn't recommend.
Well, thanks for telling us about that. And I interrupted your earlier story, so please continue. You were talking about traveling, and then I think kind of what happened after.
Yeah, so especially when you're young, when you travel, if you experience certain things, and thankfully I did in many ways, you look at life differently. You go on a different trajectory. And I remember sitting in a pub with my friends back in the UK, and they were talking, I think, about a local pool match or darts match they played, and they were getting really heated. And I sat there going, I don't care.
Mm.
And I recognized, and I loved them, they were good mates and everything, but I recognized they'd stayed on the same path and I'd gone way out. So within 10 days of returning, I was on a one-way flight back to Australia. And
Mm.
that was it. And it was, this is where I'm going to come and, bed my roots. This is where I want to be. I'm going to continue my scuba diving career, get my instructors and start teaching, and therefore I ended up meeting my wife as well. She was my student, very cliche as it happens
Mm.
to be. But scuba diving was my way to get a visa. I loved it. It's a lifestyle, but I also got sponsored. So it was
Mm.
I'm doing this because it's great and fun and enjoyable and a dream job. Not always. There are some bad days like any job, but it was definitely my route to go. This is where my new home's going to be, in
Mm.
Australia. But that's a lifestyle job. And after a while, some people go, I need time at home, because I was doing, various days out at sea. It is very much you're on, you're off, you're on, you're off. There's not much balance. It's awesome for the time that you're in it, but for some people, including myself, it does have a sell by day, for
Mm.
a bit of normality, a bit of land living, if you like. And that's where I entered the corporate world.
Well, you've given us a little of your background, and I think you've really previewed a lot of what we can kind of expect to hear and see in your story. And you started right at the beginning about talking about pushing boundaries, and everything that you've talked about has in one way or another really reflected that. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about your story. But before we get into the 5 questions, we ask the same 5 questions every time. I do something with each guest. And so, Jack, as you think ahead to the next, call it 40, 45 minutes or so, in the sharing of your story with us today, what intention would you have for yourself?
For myself, my intention is to share a story that can resonate with others, so that they can learn that adversity can help you grow, that you can redefine your identity. And it's, I suppose it might, again, possibly a bit cliche. It's going to be okay.
Mm. I love that. It's going to be okay. Personally, self-referencing. My intention is to support you in your intention by creating a container for you to be able to share your story. And that with all episodes in this podcast, and yours is certainly going to be no exception, there will be someone or someone's out there who will hear your story. It will see a little bit of themselves in you and your story, and it will help them feel a little bit more connected, a little less alone, and in the best of cases, maybe feel inspired or even empowered to do something they've been wanting to do secretly or otherwise. So let's get into it.
Absolutely. You're spot on, right, because what I'll share is not only the journey, but the decisions that I made, some right, some very, very wrong. Uh, we on journeys, it isn't smooth. We make mistakes, and I'm very open about those because hopefully other people can recognize those mistakes within themselves, and it can prevent them from doing the same.
It's really powerful, isn't it? Right? Because, we're not here to tell anyone what to do or how to do it or anything like that. But in sharing the stories, people will see things. It's like, ooh, I really like that. I really want to do that. Ooh, I really like that, but I don't want to do that. And they'll see things that it's like, well, I probably shouldn't do that, but I'm going to do it anyway. And if they hear enough stories, then they'll hear enough reasons why maybe they should reconsider or doing or not doing something, right?
Yeah, Paul, I've definitely been someone in the past that knows I shouldn't be doing it, and I'm gonna do it anyway because it's what I want to do.
I'm kind of the same. Like I sometimes feel like I'm not that person because, the really, really what I view and see as like the really big and bad things, are generally not the things I'm doing. But it's like I kind of make up for it in all the little things, right? So
Yeah.
Okay. So, quick acknowledgement for you and also for our listeners today. Again, we're using the world of Zoom for our recordings, and you're on the other side of the planet. So, there might be, as we have our conversation, a little bit of a lag. And so, I jump in from time to time. Hey, I want to ask a question or whatever. So, if we end up over speaking each other, then we'll just like correct ourselves and keep rolling. So, I just wanted to put that out there. So,
Sounds great.
Jack, let's get into the first question. Where in your life have you found yourself sitting on a comma?
Multiple times, I think, but I'm going to bundle it up into one story, which takes place over
Okay.
probably about a 4-year period. And don't worry, I won't go day to day because otherwise we'll be here all day. Sitting in a space of what was and what could be is big around this area. So one of the most defining points began in 2019. So I was working for this corporate business,
Mhm.
and in this story, it's throughout my time within this business or part with this business, and I was there for sort of 10 years, and I had so many great experiences and learned so much during this time. But also, I grew up a lot in the corporate world and became savvy and can now be aware of what to watch out for. It ties in with that, but it also ties in with
Mm.
mortality because in my early 30s, I had to face my own mortality, which will become clear in a minute. So, what started all
Mm.
this was in March, April 2019. I was away on a bit of a sales conference. And after a good day, we'll go out for a dinner and a couple of drinks. And I remember walking into a restaurant with my team or with the team I was working with. And walking in, my left foot feels like it's magnetized to the floor. I go from walking normally to I'm stuck, I can't move. Very literal, which sounds bizarre, but it's the best way I can describe it.
Mm.
And I end up dragging my left leg effectively to the end of the table where I take a seat. And I don't tell anybody about it. I don't want it to cause a scene, but I'm just trying to, it feels numb and I'm lifting my leg up and down. It's dead weight. It's very bizarre.
Mm.
And a colleague of mine heads outside to go for a cigarette, which and I smoked at the time, so I was like, "Can I join you?" He's like, "Yeah, no worries." I was like, "Can you help me?" And he looks very confused. I'm like, "Don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone."
Mm.
Again, not wanting to do a scene, but just give me a hand. And he basically sort of, not drags me out, but helps me out to the bench on the street. And at this point, the numbness has gone up from my leg all the way up to my arm. And I'm virtually slumped on my left-hand side. But I feel fine, walking as clearly then as
Mm.
I am to you now. And I'm going, this is very bizarre. This is very weird. I'm pins and needles. I'm numb. And then the feeling starts to come back. So again, subside, starts to go down, down, down. I go, oh, I can feel my fingers. This is good. Oh, maybe, I don't know, maybe it was a trapped nerve or something. I'm fine. And then it comes back really fast and really swiftly. And we make the decision, thanks to another colleague of mine that came out and to find out what was going on, that I probably should go to hospital just in case. And I tell him to tell the rest of the team, I'm going back to the
Mm.
hotel. My knees are playing up. I'm being grumpy, whatever. Again, not wanting to cause a scene, as one does. Get to hospital now, and anyone's been to ER or A&E. Normally what happens when you get to triage is you come to check in, and they go, oh, what's your name? What's your problem? And you go, oh, my name's this, and I've got a sore this, or I broke my leg, or whatever it might be. Okay, no worries. Sit over there for 3 hours. It's the normal way things happen.
Mm-hmm.
What gave me the first indication that I was in trouble was I'm there slumped over with my friend holding me up, going, this has happened in the last half hour. Not sure what's going on. Okay, sir, come straight through now. So straight away, a door opens up to my right. I'm in a wheelchair being
Mm.
rushed through. So then, okay, this isn't good. And I get lifted up onto a bed, my
Mm-hmm.
shirt ripped open, and sort of all these your wires attached to your chest, and all these devices and whatnot going beep 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 beep. And I'm being rushed. Sorry, lots of people are rushing around me all of a sudden, and then I hear the word stroke. And to hear that word
Mm.
as a person in their early 30s who's very active, again, I've many years as scuba diving instructor. I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro at this point, which is one of the highlights of my life. Someone very active and, for all intents and purposes, relatively fit and healthy. You uh, like a bullet. It's so terrifying when you're that young. I'm probably at any point terrifying, but it's so shocking. And
Mm.
it was real fear that I felt. What continued that night was more tests. They couldn't quite work out what's going on. I was away from home, so I had a flight home next day, and I was determined I'm going home. And so I made a deal. I had like a physio with
Mm.
me throughout the night, testing strength of my feet and my legs and my hands. So I'd do, and every hour I'd like squeeze her finger if I could do it. And I make a deal with her. If I could
Mm-hmm.
squeeze her hand, I'd get an hour off. So I had a target in my mind. I'm going home. If I can get an hour off enough times, I can get discharged. I think at 11 o'clock, I could make my 2 o'clock flight.
Mm-hmm.
Not the normal way to think, but I succeeded. Thankfully, I did get on the flight. And my friend who took me to the hospital that night, he stayed with me till like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And that colleague, as far as I'm concerned, he's like family. He and I have seen each other at our absolute worst. I love him to bits, but I'll never forget that because
Mm.
it was real fear. But getting back home, I had then a few months of more and more tests, and they couldn't work out what had happened. They said, look, we thought it might have been a stroke, or what's called a TIA, which is like a minor stroke or a temporary stroke.
Mm-hmm.
We can't work it out. You're young, you're fit, you're healthy. It's just a hiccup. Carry on, but just take aspirin for the next 6 months as a precaution, because aspirin's a blood thinner. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, you sure? You sure? Like, this is okay, fine. And mentally, I wasn't in a great space. Mentally, I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't good. And I just kind of blocked it, didn't really process it, and went, you're fine, get on with it, go.
Can I interrupt on that for just a moment?
Sure.
So when folks tell their stories here, those of us who are listening, we've all kind of been around enough people that one of the things that we tend to do when we're listening is like we make assumptions, right? Yeah. I know what that means. I know what that's like. I get where he's going and that sort of thing. I always do this during episodes. I'd love to just kind of take this moment right here and drill down a little bit more so we can get a little bit more of a picture into what it was like for you. You said mentally I wasn't good. What was going on for you in this moment, like, or at this period? When you say mentally I wasn't good, what was going on?
Mentally, I was angry, um,
Hmm.
angry, confused. There's still an element of fear there. You're not trusting your body for the first time in your life, and that's a very weird experience. And I buried it, if I'm
Hmm.
honest. I buried those feelings at the time and just went, "You're fine. Get on with it. You'll be fine." Uh,
What was making you bury it?
Probably didn't want to deal with it. Deal with it at the time. It was, if they're saying you're fine, then it's you're fine. Get on with it. And that experience of that night was so harrowing in many ways that I didn't know how to process it. And, with
Hmm.
that, it takes time. But because I didn't at the time, which I did in the end, get that closure of this is what it is, this is what's wrong with you, this is what we're going to do. I didn't get that at the time. I had no
Hmm.
facilitation with those things in my mind.
Hmm. Okay. Well, I kind of interrupted you, so continue. So,
So what continued from then is I was like, okay, fine, I'm going to carry on with life. Everything's fine. And I had a trip booked in the following January. So now we're heading to January 2020 to India. Uh,
so this now, how many months later? How many months later, and there you didn't get an answer, so you've just kind of moved on.
Moved on. So the first incident was March, April 2019. So we're talking, yeah, no, 9 months, 10 months. Um,
Okay.
so January 2020, I go to India with a friend of mine to an amazing adventure where we drive a tuk-tuk the length of India from Rajasthan all the way down to Cochin
Wow.
for 2.5 weeks. Amazing. Would recommend it to anybody. However, in the middle of this trip, we're in the middle of nowhere buying fuel and oil for the tuk-tuk, which we named Sandy. And as I'm walking away from this hole in the wall, I start to go down. I start to lose it on my left-hand side. And there's a taste. If anyone's had a TIA or a stroke, there's a taste on it. It's really hard to explain. It's like metallic taste.
Mm.
Yeah, that comes into that goes to your mouth. And I knew immediately what it was as it was almost in slow motion. So very slowly going down on my left-hand side and feeling and tasting this taste.
Mm.
And seeing my poor friend was very pale. This time there was no fear, but the anger came back a lot because I was just so angry that I was in the situation. I literally swore every swear word there was under the sun out. I think at that point, because I was just so frustrated that I was in this
Hmm.
situation that I shouldn't be because I was fine and I got over this and it was gone. And these sensations and feelings you have. But equally, what do? You're in the middle of nowhere. So I had thankfully the sense to bring aspirin with me just in case. So I knew what to do. So I asked my friend to get me to where we were staying for the night, and I would lay down because I couldn't walk. I would take aspirin and try and raise my heart rate just to get the blood flow going.
Hmm.
And that's all you can do in that moment. A lot of people have gone, right, where's the nearest hospital? How many thousand miles we need to go? My mind didn't go there. My mind was, when I can walk, we're finishing this race. We're
Mm.
finishing because this is what I've come here to do, and I'm not going to let this hiccup ruin that. I will deal with this when I get home.
So it's interesting. I'd love to kind of dive into that for just a moment. So first of all, I mean, thank you for sharing this. And I just have to acknowledge you for how terrifying that has to be. I mean, even down to the words that when this first happened, you said you didn't trust your body.
Mm-hmm.
Now here you are. And it seems like I'm inferring this. So correct me where I'm wrong. There's this element of what? Because it doesn't seem as though you're really terribly concerned about what could happen next. How could this progress? What could be what could happen beyond just okay, I'm weak. Let's get the weak and the numbness, you know, cleared up and continue. What was empowering you to just say to hell with it? Let's
Yeah.
keep going.
I'm quite stubborn for one, but also I had a goal. It was because I'd been through it, nearly a year before, and nothing worse had happened at that stage yet. more was to come. Um, it was, I know what this is. I know how to handle it. I can control what I can control. Anything outside of what I can control, don't worry about it.
Mm.
So I'm going to get myself back up where I can walk again, and I can feel my hand and use my
Mm-hmm.
hands, and I can drive. And we're going to continue on this amazing journey in this race, and we're going to finish and going to have a great time. This problem, albeit it might be big, it turned out to be bigger than I thought at the time. I can't do anything about it whilst I'm here. I'll deal with it when I'm at home. So it's kind of compartmentalization a little bit.
Mm.
Um, and so that's exactly what I did. When I could walk the next day, we carried on our journey and finished the trip, and it was fantastic. When I got back to Australia, and a lot of people think this is a bit odd, but again, I guess people deal with things a different way. I didn't tell my wife or my mum, who's back in the UK. I didn't tell them what had happened yet. And the reason for doing that was clear, because I needed to know what was going on. I needed to find out for me, because if I told them what had happened, understandably, they'd have so many questions about, this, that, and the other. I didn't have the answers yet. So I needed to know, I need to go and bang some doors down, to be honest, to find out what on earth is going on that's causing this to happen before I could tell them. So I went to my GP, who wasn't brilliant, if I'm honest. His initial response was to suggest I might have MS. Not the greatest thing to just throw out there without a test done. We'll gloss over that. But I got more tests, and thankfully I got a different neurologist, but I had every test under the sun, Paul, which, I mean, geez, every Holter monitors and all sorts. And what we found out, and I had an amazing neurologist this time. She was brilliant. She showed me the scan results that somehow these came up this time. And she showed me the scan, and the right-hand side of my brain had 3 what looked like stars, but they're bleeds, so strokes, effectively, of different brightnesses. So we found out then is I had in fact had 3 minor strokes. When the third one, to this day, I'll never know. So that was, while strange, I wasn't scared at that point. I wasn't feeling the fear that I did the year before, because it was great. This is good news. I know what's wrong. I know what's happened. Excellent. Now why? It was kind of going from step to step to step. So I know what's wrong. Now I need to know why. So ensued from there further tests. And what we found out was I had a bit of a unique thing, which a lot of people actually have, but just don't know about it, is when we're born, we all have a partition in our heart. And when we're born, that partition actually flaps. It's not connected. And we take our first breath, and it closes. And it seals on that first breath. For whatever reason, for 30 odd years, mine never sealed. So every time it's going back, 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 and collecting, blood cells and gunk and all sorts of lovely things that can potentially turn into clots and therefore go to your brain and cause a stroke. So at this point, I had to stop and breathe and reflect, because now I knew what had caused it. And I needed to look back and go, well, hang on, how many years did you spend underwater? You climbed Kilimanjaro, you did all these things. If this had happened in any one of those places, you're not here. And it's not an over dramatization. It's just, that's a fact. You're not here. So, okay, take stock of that. And whilst this is not fun, and you're going to have heart surgery to sort this out, this is great in a weird sort of way. The extra complication going into heart surgery is we're now into March, April 2020. March, April 2020, COVID's kicking off. Just to add to complications. So I go into surgery to put an amazing device basically through the 2 partitions, through a rod. And as the rod comes out, a fan on both sides opens up and closes and seals together and is there. The heart grows over it is the idea. Really smart, amazing. So I go in on the Thursday, have heart surgery on the Thursday, and I wake up on the Friday. And what most people would be doing in hospital on their laptop after heart surgery is watching Netflix, reading a book, playing a game, watching TV series. I'm on Microsoft Teams talking to people at work. And repeating the same mistakes that I did the year before, which is throw myself into work because it's what I know, what I control, what I can feel value in. And the business that I worked for at the time, and I won't name them because it's not fair, but it's something that I'm very passionate now after learning it. It has a very strong ethos and culture around we're a family. Now, the dangers of that are twofold. One, and I'm not talking about sort of small deli, small delis down the street that mum and pop. They're great. We need more of those. I love them. But when you're talking about corporations and organizations that claim their families, you come up two problems. One, when people are there, if they buy into it, which I'll be fully open, my God, I did, and I preached it. You work more than you feel you work more than you should because you feel it's the right thing to do because we're a family. That's spoken about quite often. The other element I'll get to later, which isn't spoken about. But because I was of this mantra of we go over and above, it's what we do for the team, I'm on Microsoft Teams and I'm actually talking to both my leader and the HR director at the time. And I remember I've still got the photo, I might send it to you. I sent them a photo of me wired up, looking like hell, going, yeah, I'm fine. My leader did his absolute best. So I'm not going to put anything on this on him. But I was not to be reasoned with at the time. I was going, no, I'm fine. I'm just only doing bits and pieces. And the HR director was trying to sort of go, you really should rest. You don't need to, stop, you're fine. And then went, all right, well, I can't stop him. I reflect back now and go, well, you could. I wasn't behaving right. What you should do in that situation, IT, disconnect him. Take the decision out of my hands because I wasn't behaving right. I was nowhere at the best of my ability. It was a day after I had heart surgery. But it enabled me. And this enablement continued. And what happened from that is I got discharged a couple of days later, or a day later, sorry. And I think that was the Saturday. And the following Tuesday night, I'm at home. My wife's out giving plasma. And I'm just relaxing on the sofa. And out of the blue, my heart goes mental. And when I mean mental, arrhythmic, so all over beat, like someone playing the drum kit, but also really fast in an instant. So I'm panting, I'm sweating, I throw up, I feel dizzy. One would normally just call the ambulance straight away, but because probably more of a guy thing and a bit of an idiot, I contact my neighbor to double check if I should call an ambulance. He comes over, takes one look at me and nearly passes out himself just goes very pale. And we get an ambulance to come immediately. They take one look at me, get me the ambulance on my driveway, and then we stop and we don't move, which is very confusing. And they explained to me the heart rate that I've got is so high, they're concerned about me going into cardiac arrest. So they need to wait for another ambulance to be with them if they need to work on me together. So I'm wired up, kind of locked in in the ambulance and panting away, waiting, which is very bizarre. Getting to hospital, rushed in. My heart rate's doing, if I'm right, 230 beats a minute, which is extremely fast and quite dangerous. And they put me in this small cubicle and they try and reset it by using magnesium and potassium in a drip. And one of them, I can't remember which one, but one of them really hurts. I remember feeling like someone squeezing my arm when it went in, like a horse bite. My wife gets home, bless her, and the neighbors rush out and go, Jack's gone to hospital. Jack's been rushed to hospital. Da, 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 da. And she rushes to the hospital, but she can't come in. It's COVID. She's not allowed. So I'm in this cubicle alone. And I get my mum on the phone back in the UK because she's aware of everything that's going on with my heart surgery, and I'm talking to her and just trying to calm down because it's terrifying. And as I'm talking to her, the nurses rush in and they go, we can't, this isn't working. We have one other option, which is to put you out, defibrillate your heart. So that's the zappy thing for anyone that's not sure what a defib is, that they might have seen on medical shows, which will stop your heart, and then we will try and restart it again. There is no
Mm.
guarantee it will work, but it's the only shot we've got. And we're confident that it's going to work because we've done it before, and the odds, we're confident this is going to work. Now, my mum, bless her, hearing this, I've got so much sympathy for her. My God, that must have been absolutely terrifying for her. At the same time, whilst hearing that and talking to her, I was completely filled with fear, and there was tears running down my face, going on, wow, this is really going to happen. What's going to happen next? Questions, questions, questions. Then something really bizarre happened. The moment I said goodbye to my mum, and I literally was doing that, I was saying goodbye to her because I didn't know whether I was going to talk to her again, because I didn't know there was guarantee that I was going to come back. The moment I hung up that phone,
Mm.
I went really calm. I went really calm and ready. And a few people have asked me, were you at peace with, not coming back? Were you at peace with dying? And it wasn't that. I certainly wasn't at peace with that. I was not willing. There wasn't a chance. I was of the mindset, and I use this metaphor of, I was playing poker and I had one card left. This was the card that I had to deal. If I
Mm.
wanted to come back and live my life and see my wife and, and talk to my mum again and all these things, I had one card. So my damn God, I'm going to play it. And I remember laying there and just repeating, you're going to wake up. 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 And kept on repeating until I was out. And
Mm.
thankfully, I woke up. And it worked. It reset. And I stayed in overnight with my medication that they put me on, adjusted. But this continued to happen over the course of the next couple of months to lesser degree. I think it was about a week later, and I was 190, that the heart went. When I went in the second time, again, it was potassium, magnesium. Okay, we're going to defib you, Mr. Glennon. Okay, cool. I kind of similar to my experience with the
Mm.
strokes. The second time, there was no fear because I'd done it. It was, all right, I know the dangers, but I know I'm coming back. Even though the risk was still there that I might not, in my mind, it was, you've done this, you're going to do it. Again, there was just not an option in my mind. So there was no fear, weirdly. The second time was a Sunday, and then it happened again on that Wednesday. And unfortunately, that time they couldn't defib me because it was too soon after the previous occasion. So I had to just stay in
Mm.
overnight, being heavily monitored, panting away. It's probably a great way to lose weight, to be fair. Panting away until it stopped, because effectively what had happened was the heart itself was hugely inflamed from the surgery. Didn't like what had gone in, didn't like being touched and messed around with, and therefore wasn't behaving like it normally should. So I was on tons of medication during this time for until about August, just trying to, basically, while it heals and grows around this device. But equally, I had to maintain my heart rate. My wife had a brilliant idea, and she bought a Fitbit, so I could see my heart rate because I had to keep it at a certain level, just to not annoy it.
Mhm.
But ironically, during this time, again, this goes back to the other element of my work. In May, my leader, my mentor, and who I owe a hell of a lot to for my experience in the business and the good stuff, left the business, and not on the best terms. We were told on the Wednesday that he was going to be finishing up on the Friday. And the moment that call dropped out, I got another call from the execs offering me his role. So this was
Mm.
an opportunity for me to grow, brilliant opportunity for me to go into a leadership role, which is something I'd always done in previous positions, previous companies. But I was in and out of hospital. So it was a bit of a challenge. And I remember calling my new would-be leader on my way to hospital and panting, going, "Hi, yeah, I would like to accept the job, please, but I'll call you tomorrow if that's okay." Uh, which you reflect now
Mm.
and you go, "You idiot, what you doing?" Um, but it was my way of going, "Okay, life's this isn't going to define me. What's happened to me isn't going to define who I am. It's not going to stop me through my progression, and I'm going to do everything I can to continue my life how I want to live it." I took it too far.
Yeah. I I was gonna say I'd love to kind of jump in on that, and then also we still have four
Sorry.
questions, but I think given what you shared with us, no, I think you're going to be able to move through those questions pretty fluidly. But just so much of what you're sharing and all of these things that have happened to you, and yet even amidst them, what I hear you describing, just continue to describe pushing boundaries. I hear you continue to describe in a weird sort of way,
Mhm.
adventure, because it's like all these really wild and crazy things are happening to you. And yet there's still, even amongst the fear, there's still this element of you that just kind of like sort of pushes back against it, or sort of kind of shrugs your shoulders at it. I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong, but that's kind
Yeah.
of what I'm hearing is, again, just this pushing against these boundaries.
Oh, you're spot on, right, Paul? And to a certain degree, I've always had that. I do sometimes take it too far. I know that within myself.
Mm.
A perfect example of that is in when I was had my final meeting with my surgeon and the doctors in August of that year, and I was told, you don't need to be on the pills anymore. Just be careful. That day, I went out and got horrendously drunk with a lot of mates because it was the first time
Mm-hmm.
that I could. I couldn't drink or go and have fun at all in that period. So that's the first thing I did was go, right, we're going to celebrate because I'm fine and I'm going to prove that my body's fine by going out and getting horrendously drunk. Not
Mm.
smart at all, but it was my way of, you use the term pushing back. Absolutely is
Mm-hmm.
my way of pushing back and going, I'm not gonna put up with this and let this define me, and I'm gonna go out and do what, to a certain degree, what I want. Um,
Yeah.
there are certain things that you are left with when these things happen to you. I have a tick now because we all have weird things that we feel on our bodies. You stand up too fast, you might feel a bit dizzy, for example, or you stare at the clock or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. But because that trust in my body will never 100% be there anymore, I have a sort of tester that I do. So anytime I feel my body's not quite right for whatever reason, again, could be too hot or could be, again, dizzy or whatever it might be, from just normal, like me being the same as anybody else, I use my thumbnail and I pinch it into my index finger. I do this probably a couple of times a day, because I know that if I can feel that thumbnail in my index finger, I'm fine.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And it's not a tick. It's not something that I've consciously started to do, but it's since then, since 2020,
yeah.
that I've literally done since then.
Well, you've already kind of started answering the second question. Let me go ahead and ask it and see what else you would add as you look back at this comma that you have sat on, this story that you're telling us. What else did it create for you? You've kind of already started to share a little of that. What would you add?
It forced me to confront myself at a deeper level in many ways. The health journey took years to kind of define and navigate. When it linked in with the professional side, that really only came to head over the last year and a half. Because, and this comes into the second element and the dangers of the family element, because in corporations and organizations, when they're claiming the family bit, where it goes in my mind really wrong and really dangerous is when they have to behave like corporations and organizations with their people.
Hmm.
I'm talking about when there are disagreements, when there are disciplinaries, or when there are layoffs or redundancies, depending on where you're from. Because what happens in this scenario is you go from being part of a family to, this place is suddenly somewhere that causes me pain, or causes me hurt, or in case of redundancies and layoffs, doesn't want me anymore.
Hmm.
And for me, so I went through a redundancy with this business earlier this year, beginning of this year. And that made me question my purpose because I'd given too much, my own fault, to a certain degree to this business, and reflecting through the health element, going, hang on, this all went, and suddenly then didn't want me anymore.
Mm.
And it's not like cutthroat, layoffs, redundancies happen for all sorts of reasons, and I get why, and they need to happen for businesses to survive sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But what the dangers of that is, it's the double whammy. It's, hang on, we're a family, so we look at each other after each other first, and we're there for each other at the lowest moments, but actually we don't need you anymore. And because of my journey through my health, I've thrown everything into my work, literally everything I had, probably, and too much, very much so, that it was so tied into my identity. And I share this quite openly, that, I mean, there are people that called me by this company name. So say, for example, I work for Nokia.
Mm-hmm.
People called me Nokia Jack.
Mm-hmm.
So then having to leave that world, I was like, who am I? What's my identity? What's my worth? And having to find that again was brilliant.
Mm. That's actually a great segue into the third question, because I sense that's where you're going. And the third question is, what did you learn about yourself as a result of sitting on this comma or these commas?
That you're stronger than, well, that I'm stronger than I thought I was. I discovered a well of resilience throughout all scenarios over this sort of 3-4 year period, that ran deeper than I could have known. And I remember a moment, because we sort of touched on it when we sort of chatted at the start about how I'd been over to California earlier this year. Because what I did when I left is I wanted to take a trip to go and find me a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
shed the routine, and shed the skin, if you like. I remember I was driving down from the Sierra Nevada mountains, and it was a beautiful day, and I had a song blaring out, and as many people do, we sing in the car, not very well. But as is often the way the universe does these things to us, I think sometimes the song's lyrics was so resonant with everything that I'd just been through with the business, and probably through the 3 years. And as I was singing, it clicked, and I started to smile from literally ear to ear, and tears started to run down my face, and it all just came out. Like, I just let it go. All this tension that I'd had, and words like, I tried so hard and got so far, didn't really matter, but that's okay. We're being sung, and it was
Lincoln Park, right?
got it, bang on.
I'm self-referencing, because that song does that to me too. Yes.
Oh, it did. I mean, it was so appropriate for what I'd gone through. And I'm of that generation, I guess, as well. But and it was like, oh, you're going to be fine. And actually, you're more than that identity. That identity didn't define you. That illness didn't define you. You're more than that. And you're more, there's more layers to you than that, and you can offer more than that. And let's go and find out who that person is. And that's exciting. And I learned that despite the pain of redundancy or the fragility of health, my ability to rebuild and impact others remained unshaken. I'm not sure I like the word survivor. I'm a thriver more than anything else. Every setback becomes a setup for growth. And that's so key, not just for me, but I think for everyone.
So it's really just interesting to see kind of how the journey arced, and it's interesting to see how through all of the health challenges that you face, these really extreme and serious health situations and events, and yet it was, and maybe it's because you've simplified the story for us, as you said you were going to, right? But it's interesting, all the health and all of those things, and as soon as you would get a break, you were in the pub drinking again. But it was the redundancy or layoff, we'd say over here in the US, that really sent you looking for a new skin and shedding the old skin and releasing and letting go all those feelings and emotions.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it was. Because that had been my go-to. That had been, I love my wife and my friends, and there were certain people along the journey through my health were amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And my mum as well, back in the UK, again, God knows how tough that was for her. But my work was what I could always go to. And it gave me a sense of purpose, like, as I said, but also a sense of value. So it was huge to be forced to shed that. And it's just so important to reflect. I reflect back and go, that last year that I was working, that was miserable. I wasn't.
Hmm.
I was that year and a half. I wasn't in a good space mentally at all because of various factors going on. But there was no chance that I'd have ever left on my own fruition. No way.
Yeah.
I needed that to happen, and it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And it's nothing personal against anybody. It's
Hmm.
not the environment that I joined, but it wasn't doing me good at the time, and it forced me to shed that skin, and that's huge.
So,
Um, yeah,
Jack, the fourth question, this might be a good place to springboard into that, is what changed for you as a result of sitting on this comma?
everything.
Mm.
My perspective on life to a certain degree, and I added a certain degree because as I said right at the start, I've always had this mantra of live life like it could be tomorrow, but more literal because I've lived it. My perspective on leadership as well, to a certain degree, because I've had leaders through this time that have been amazing, but a lot that have let me down. And what success is defined as. I used to be really career driven, and I'm not now. It's really put perspective going, yes, I want a career that adds value and gives value to me, but do I care if I've got the biggest job next year or not? No, I don't. It's not gonna
Hmm.
that doesn't make me or define me or add value to my life. I've moved from a place from seeking external validation to embracing the power within me and the people closest to me. So I approach it, both life and leadership, with a heart of empathy. Emotional intelligence is a big one, and as I mentioned at the start, authenticity. My purpose, I guess, is no longer just about personal achievement. They're huge. I'm still going to have that mantra of wanting to live my life as big as I can,
Hmm.
sensibly to a certain degree, but it's
Mm.
also about seeing the joy in others. And that's where I found my purpose after leaving the business, is going, that's what gives you drive. That's what gets you up in the morning, is coaching others and lifting people up and helping them navigate their challenges. And these experiences have allowed me to create that
Mm.
mentality even clearer than I had before.
Before we go into the last question and then start to close things up, I am curious because I think you did kind of answer the question. It's like, oh, so after I call it the Lincoln Park moment, coming down the
Yeah.
hill up here in my neighborhood and shedding the old skin,
Yeah.
where you went next, it sounds like you started your own business and went into coaching. Is that correct? And then I have a follow-up question.
I did. So it was interesting. So coming out of that, I was like, okay, so what career do I want? And the employment market, I'm sure it's the same over there, is incredibly difficult right
Hmm.
now. I'm still technically searching for my next business home to have a full-time job. Um, but in that time, coming back, I wanted to really nail down again, what's my purpose, what's my why, Simon Sinek stuff. Um, but what gets me up in the morning? What's my passion? So I started putting coaching services on a couple of platforms. And after meeting a few people and doing a couple of podcasts, they're like, so what's your business? I'm like, I don't really have one. It's just me.
Hmm.
And I was talking with my wife over dinner. I just had an idea that's popped into my head, and I had a logo that, because Kilimanjaro, again, I come back to that, was one of the highlights of my entire life. It was, in terms of the physical and mental challenge, probably not many things harder, but also so rewarding. I was like, I could do something with a mountain and maybe something. And I started writing out ideas, but it gave me energy. And it really gave me a jump as well to go, God, this could be really cool if I did it as my passion project, as a side business. I hate using side hustle.
Hmm.
A
Hmm.
side business, because that's a smart thing to do. So, and using everything I'd learned through my mistakes and doing things slightly differently, rather than going, this is a course, this is a 101, going, okay, well, I could lead with empathy and emotional intelligence as a leader first and foremost, and that could be a passion for me to do that. So yeah, that's exactly what I did, because it aligned with empowering others, and especially people who get stuck with their own commas.
Okay. Well, and thank you. And then the following follow-up question to that was, and kind of briefly, if you care to, what is the bridge between your experiences? Because you said you like to see joy in other people, you like to help people.
Yeah.
What would you say how would you describe, or okay, I'm rambling. What's the bridge from your experiences that you've shared with us to what you want to see in other people?
In what way do you mean the bridge?
Just kind of most folks that we talk to here, there's something kind of specific about their experience, their past, their story, the comma that they were sitting on
Gotcha.
that really inspired them to move into the new direction.
Um, for me, the bridge was really, again, it's defining my identity and going, what
Hmm.
do I want to do? What I talk about legacy sometimes, and my wife and I, we're one of those odd couples that don't have kids. But I have a big mantra myself about leaving a legacy wherever I go, whatever
Hmm.
I do. I always want to make something better. Even if other people don't even know it was me, I don't care. I know it was better. And I know I've put processes in place or helped develop people. So the bridge, I guess, for me is using my experiences, good and bad, to support others. It gives me so much joy seeing others overcome those problems and challenges. I
Ah.
remember when probably one of the highlight of my career at the previous company, I was an awards night that we had, and I won the Leader of the Year award within the business. That wasn't my highlight. The highlight that night was seeing one of my team win Individual of the Year. And that was someone who I onboarded when he joined. And he had really big struggles when he joined. He was new to the industry, new to the corporate world, and he went through real challenges. And to see him grow and to be with him on that journey, to then accumulate in him getting recognized with such a high accolade as the number one individual in Australia and New Zealand in the region,
Hmm.
that blew my award out the water. Just
Mm.
phenomenal.
Nice. Nice. Okay, Jack, we've got to bring it to a close. There's so much more we could get into, I'm sure. But for the last question, kind of in a short, simple phrase or a couple of key words, what does getting off the comma look like for you?
Ooh, getting off the comma means stepping into the unknown with belief that taking action, even when the path isn't clear, will give you the end result. Um,
Mm,
it's running towards adversity, and knowing, okay, you're not made of rock, but you're not made of glass either. So taking those bold steps, one step at a time.
mm. Okay, that's really descriptive, and I personally love those words and that choice of words too, especially the take action and do it even if the path isn't clear. So, Jack, let's kind of land the plane here. So, there's so much in you to tell and so much to share. If people wanted to look you up, find out what you're up to, and potentially even reach out to and connect with you, I'll put the links in the show notes. Where can people find you?
Yeah, it'd be an absolute pleasure. So they can find me various forms either through the website, glennonpc.com, or my LinkedIn page, or even on Instagram. The business is just me, so they're not going to get a bot or a team or anything. So those probably three ways is the best way to get hold of me.
Okay, nice. And then the last thing we do before we close is something that I do in every episode because you've been so gracious today to share your story with us and give people the opportunity to connect with your experiences and see what resonates for them. And this podcast is all about lifting up others and being able to give a voice to people who don't always have a voice. Your story wouldn't be complete if we didn't give you a chance to give a voice to the people who matter to you. I call this section acknowledgments. And so it's your opportunity to lift up folks that you know, and that could be organizations, causes, other creators, or even just people in your immediate circle or family. Who would you like to acknowledge today? And we'll put their info in the show notes.
Um, so people to acknowledge. I mean, people closest to me more than anything else. My mum, my wife, we're really close. And it's always when you go through these challenges, and anyone that's gone through adversity, the people who step up are not often the people that you expect. and the people that don't step up are sometimes the people you do expect. But a couple of close friends of mine, a guy called Sean and Rick, who was with me that first night in the hospital, those two were really, really paramount in my journey, especially through my health. But without my wife and my mum back in the UK, you know, they mean the world.
Wonderful. And you've referenced all of these folks in your story, and it's very clear, how important and meaningful these folks are. So definitely, I can see the significance of giving those folks acknowledgement today. So thank you for that. And certainly appreciate you coming on, sharing your story, sharing it openly and vulnerably. And I look forward to talking and connecting with you more, and certainly invite everybody who's listening to reach out and connect with you and follow your journey as it continues to unfold. And wish you a wonderful weekend ahead. I know your day's just getting started over there, and I hope it's a wonderful day.
My pleasure. You too.
What an honor it is for me to witness these powerful stories. I hope you feel the same way too. Think about what you learned from this conversation. What stood out for you? What challenged you? What inspired you? And I encourage you to write it down in some form of journaling and reflection. Surprises can reveal themselves to you when you do this. And if you were moved by today's conversation, pass it along to someone you care about. Let's spread the word. Let's continue to build connection. And if you do discover something you'd like to unpack further, book a call with me and let's talk about it. My links are in the show notes. Be sure to like this episode, follow the podcast here on this platform and social media at Off the Comma, and feel free to comment and interact with these posts and episodes. Check out my website for workshops, events, and my sponsor community. I'm covering the costs of production by curating my own sponsors who align with our vision. Be sure to check them out. They're all powerful people and businesses. Thank you for listening to this episode of Off the Comma. As always, keep noticing and keep listening.